Okay, this is chapter 2, but it is the first lesson that we'll be going over in Photoshop. So this is what Photoshop looks like. It looks very similar to Illustrator. These are your default panels over here: layers, adjustments, color. Layers is probably the most important thing to understand in Photoshop. And then your tool panels look somewhat similar. You'll recognize a few of them, like the pen tool, the text. Um, so it's somewhat similar layout, but definitely a different function here. So the first thing that you are going to do is open up MiniBridge, which is under File, Browse in MiniBridge. So MiniBridge is great because it allows you to see your thumbnails of your images down here at the bottom. And then if it says Launch Bridge, just hit Launch Bridge and you're good to go. So what I'd like you guys to start doing, it'll be easier for you, is while we wait for that, you want to go into that shared drive that you're always going into. Common Teachers, Howard Shared. And then there's, I put all the Illustrator files into one folder so they're not in your way anymore. The PS02 lessons, like I said, we're doing chapter 2 before we're doing chapter 1. So what you want to do to make it easier on yourself is to just click and drag your folder onto your desktop to store it temporarily so that you can access it easier. And then once you're in MiniBridge, if you could click on Favorites, and then you'll see your desktop and you'll see that PS02 lessons. And so then it'll have all the thumbnails that you need for that particular chapter or lesson all there and not taking up too much space. So that's one way to help you get started, just to improve your workflow. And then we're going to start the lesson. So this is the done file. It's just a picture of an old car, and it's got this like orangish vignette around it. It's called a vignette if you've got, usually it's black, in this case it's orange, but when you've got like darker edges around the frame of the picture, so you're kind of framing whatever the picture is of when you make a vignette. But like I said, usually a vignette is black and not orange, but this one is orange. Alright, so now that you've got that done file, you're not really going to do anything with it, you're just going to look at it, and you're going to switch to the PS0201 file, which is the one that doesn't have the vignette on it yet. And then you're going to go File, Save As, and you're just going to add the underscore work and save it in your documents, not in the same folder that you got it from, because otherwise it'll be in the desktop in that folder, and next time you come to that computer, I don't think it'll be there. It might be, but chances are it won't. So just click My Documents, put it in your documents, and you'll be good to go. Alright, so just a little bit about your toolbars over here, or your toolbar. There are these black lines that are kind of hard to see. I think it's a little bit easier to see that black line when it's a two-column view instead of a one-column view. And what it's doing is it's separating into groups your tools. So your selection tools are these top 6 up here. Well, selection are the top 4, cropping, and then your eyedropper. So, and measuring tool. So it's the selection, cropping, and measuring tool section. So, but mostly you want to pay attention to your selection, because that's really important in Photoshop. That's how you can put part of one picture into another, is by making an accurate selection. And then the next grouping, there's 8 here, are your retouching and painting tools. So a big thing in Photoshop is retouching, and so you can clean up, like if you got a portrait of a person, you could take away any blemishes they might have, or change their eye color, or do any kind of correction like that. So this group of 8 here are your retouching and painting tools. And then the next group, there's only a group of 4, and these are your vector tools. So anything here is going to be vector. So you've got your pen tool, your text, your selection when you're using vector, and then your shape tool. Just like in Illustrator, you've got the same shapes pretty much. There's no flare tool or star tool or whatever, but pretty much the same. So those are your vector drawing tools. And then down here you've just got your navigation, your hand, your zoom, and then your color area, and then your quick mask down here, which is really important. Again, when we're going to put something from one picture into another, we'll be doing some masking. So those are the tools, and fairly similar to Illustrator, but different functions. Okay, so now we're going to select the brush tool, regular brush. So looks just like a paintbrush, same icon as Illustrator. And then we have our control panel up at the top that changed because we changed to this brush. You've got, in this one, you've got your size and the hardness. The hardness, if it's at 0%, is a very soft brush, which means that the edge of the brush is kind of diffused. And then if you go up to 100%, then the edge of the brush is really sharp. And so this would be a hard-edged brush, and then this would be more of a soft brush. You can see those. And then the size, of course, you can see if you come out into the screen what it looks like. I usually use the brackets, the brackets on your, can't do it here, I suppose. The brackets on your keypad, or change the size of your brush. So instead of typing in a specific number, you just use the brackets, and it's much quicker to change the size of your brush. Okay, so you're going to first change the color, and it's suggesting changing to a blue, and it says to use a bright blue. So you want to use something more on this side of the color panel. This side over here has black added or white, depending on which. So like the y-axis has white added and the x-axis has black to make it darker or duller. So the brighter colors are going to be in the upper right corner. So just pick something, and you can choose whatever shade of blue you want, and just hit OK. The next thing we're going to do is come in here, and you're going to change the size of the brush to 100, and the hardness should be at 0%, so it's a really soft brush. And to close that panel, you just click anywhere up here at the top. And it says to just click and drag. Oh, that should be at 100%, and that should be at normal. It's just different because I changed it. And one thing you're going to want to do here is open up your history so that you can make corrections to something. Like I just had to correct something. I'll get to that in a second, but before we actually start painting on our image here, it's not in the book, But something that you need to do for every picture that you do in Photoshop, whether it's in the book or not, you need to start getting in the habit of dragging your background layer down to the Create New Layer button. So what it does is it makes a copy. If I were to just create a new layer, it would be a blank layer, and I don't want just a blank layer. I want a copy of the background. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the visibility off of the background. So the background is locked. Usually you can't change that. There's a way around that, but it will prevent you from messing up your original image if you create a background copy. So once again, you just click and drag the layer that says background down to the Create New Layer button, and it will come up with this background copy, which is not locked, which you can edit and change and do whatever. And if you make so many mistakes that you just need to start all the way over, then you would just delete that layer and you'd still have your original, your background. And then also it will, I guess, just allow you to not make changes to the original and mess with the actual pixels. So it's kind of like an invisible layer on top of your image, and so then you're messing with that and doing adjustments to sort of a transparent layer on top of your original image. Okay, so now that we have the background copy, once again, I'm going to change that back. You want to just make it says to just draw a long line across the top of your image here. And you'll notice that it's a really opaque looking, not see-through. Opaque means it's not see-through. You have this blue splotch, which you don't want. So then it says to hit Control-Z to get rid of that, which is fine, but one of the biggest problems that people have switching from Illustrator to Photoshop is that Control-Z only works once. And then if I hit Control-Z again, my blue streak comes back up. And so what it's doing, I could do this all day long, and sometimes people do this for quite a while before they figure out what's happening. As I hit Control-Z, it removes it, hit Control-Z again, and it's undoing my undo that I just did. So it's not very effective to do Control-Z. So you have two options. You could do Shift Control-Z, or maybe let me think. Yeah, Shift Control-Z. I think I've just done it too many times now and it won't let me. Alt Control-Z is step backwards. Sorry. Shift Control-Z is step forward. So Alt Control-Z is what I want to do to step backward. So it's not, you're not undoing anymore, you're stepping backward. And that has to do with your history panel that I opened up here. So once again, here's your history panel. I think that should just be a default setting, but it's not, unfortunately. So you have to actually create it. So you go to Window, make sure that the check mark is next to History. And it's just a good habit to get into to have that open all the time. And you can adjust, like if you want to see more of your history than your layers, then you can just click and drag so that there's more space here. But it only saves your history for a certain number of moves, so eventually you won't be able to get back all the way to the beginning. It doesn't save your entire history. So that's just something you need to keep in mind. Like if you make a mistake, you need to catch it pretty early, otherwise you'll have to start all the way over again. You can save some history, and we'll get to that later, but for now you just want to make sure that you don't get too far before you realize that you've done something weird. But so if it's grayed out like this, that means that it's inactive, and if it's white, then that means it's active. So I can step all the way back to here where I created the new layer, I deleted that layer, go back to the duplicate layer where I first did that, or I could go back there. So you've got some options. You can go forwards and backwards. But once I do something else to this, then those forward options are going to be gone. So you don't want to give up on those completely if you don't think that, or if you think you might use them again. Alright, so back to my brush. We're still using that blue. And it says to change the opacity to 20%, approximately 20%. And then the mode, these modes are really fun. We'll be using some of these throughout the semester. The mode should be set to color. And then you are going to just go over the corner over here, and it says to just kind of brighten up the upper right corner. So what I did is I was clicking and dragging, and I didn't release the mouse until I was done. Anytime you're dealing with an opacity that's less than 100%, you want to make sure that you do your move all in one click. So you're clicking and dragging around. Because what will happen is if you go over it again, it just sort of doubles up the opacity, and then, you know, as you keep going, if you click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, then eventually the result is going to be an opacity closer to 100%. And so there's no point in having an opacity of 20% if you're just going to keep layering up. So again, I just went back to my first move with the brush tool because I know I only went over that once. That's not to say, like, you can use some creativity. You can make your brush size smaller. I'm using the brackets to make my brush size smaller, and like certain areas I could layer up, but it doesn't blend super well when I do that. So you just have to keep in mind that it's doing that. So, you know, there might be opportunities that call for that, but in this case I would just do it all in one move. Alright, so then you're going to just do a quick save that blue painting that you've done. And then you will be switching to a different color. And your panels probably will look like this, your little color options. I prefer to have the small list going so that I can actually see it, so when the book tells me to pick a specific color, it doesn't take me forever and a day to find it. So the book is suggesting to use, although this is taking forever, the pure red-orange color. So I'm selecting that, and now it is in my foreground color, so I know that it made the selection for me. So I'm going to use the brush tool, and I still want to keep it at 20% in my mode color. You can change the size of your brush. I really don't care too much about that. And then you will be painting in the upper left, and it just says to kind of go over the upper left. Again, I'm doing this all in one move, so something like that. Beautiful. Pretty unrealistic, but that's okay. And then it says to, let's see, it's got a bunch of steps that I don't really care if you know or not. Alright, next step. So we're going to change the foreground color again, and this time we're actually going to type in some numbers. So we're doing the RGB colors here. So for your R, you're going to type in 236. Your G will be 169. And then the blue will be 24. And so that's the color that it is recommending we use to make that sort of ugly looking vignette. Okay. It says to change the brush size to 175. You can always type it here, it's usually faster. And click anywhere up here to close that panel. And we need to be using the mixer brush instead of the regular brush tool. You're going to be using the mixer brush tool. So again, it's 175. You could also change your color up here. It's not really the mode, but these are like painting terms, and the style it wants you to use is moist light mix, which again is a painting term. And I don't think that there's anything else we will be changing on any of those settings. Oh, the hardness should be at 20% if it's not there already. Alright, so the next thing you're going to do, you've got this great big giant brush, is you're trying to make it look like this one down here. So don't go crazy. It's just the edge of the picture that you're trying to adjust. And that's about it. You could go over it in certain areas if you feel like it needs a little bit more. Again, you could back up using your history, or you could Control Z if it's just your last move. And that's about it. So that is just a quick lesson in Photoshop. When you go to save it, I didn't point this out earlier, but it does need to be in the PSD format. Anytime you save something in Photoshop, this is the default method, and it's the top one, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. And again, you're going to save it in your documents. And if you don't save it as a PSD, if you change it to something else, anything else, it's going to take away your layers so that you can't access those again. It's going to make whatever, it's going to merge all your layers together so that you don't have access to your original anymore. And that's a huge problem if you need to keep your original. So it's always, always, always a good idea to save as a PSD. And that's pretty much it. I think you guys know everything else that's in the book. You can hold down your space bar, and you've got your sticky hand, although I'm not zoomed out, so it doesn't matter. Zooming in, Control plus. Zooming out, Control minus. Use the sticky hand to move around. And Control 0 to get back to the full screen. So there you go. That's lesson 2 for you.